NFL free agency is almost upon us, and a lot of teams have a lot of money and a lot of needs. And so we're going to help them today as we find the best fit for each NFL team in free agency. I did this by salary cap space, and I did this by salary cap space based on Spotrac, which I think is the best for NFL salary information. But some of these might be a little bit off, but either way, I still like this is basically ranked in order of salary cap space. So if I'm off on a couple of teams, apologies, but that's just going off the information that I had. We also did have a bit of a move today as well, as Schefter tweeted out a bit ago, or am I just losing my mind? No, the Philadelphia Eagles are reportedly parting ways with six-time Pro Bowl corner Darius Slay. So Philadelphia getting a little bit more salary cap space, but that one, I didn't factor that one in too much for them because I had a pretty straight line on where I thought they should go. But anyway, here are now the, I think, best fits for each team in NFL free agency based on like who could be available, salary cap space, and obviously roster needs. And so I basically did this like a draft where the teams that had the most salary cap space got first dibs, essentially. And so for the New England Patriots, who have the most salary cap space of anybody in the NFL, I went with Ronnie Stanley. They have a very big need on the offensive line. They probably have a couple very big needs on the offensive line. And they have the most salary cap space to fill it. And Ronnie Stanley might be the best just available player in free agency, coming off of a very good season with the Baltimore Ravens. The Vegas Raiders are up next. And I think a lot of people would go quarterback here with the Raiders. While acknowledging a need, I think that they might try to go a bit more of the value route on that one, so to speak. And so I think while this should be a position of value, I think they're going to try to go out and get one of the big names at it. And so I have for the Raiders with, I have them going Aaron Jones. We did this in the like best fits for each free agent, and there's a couple that kind of cross over here, but I just think this makes so much sense. You have Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly. Pete Carroll has always had a bruising running back, and now mostly it was Marshawn Lynch. But he has always had a good running back on his teams, even going back to his SC days where you had White and Reggie Bush back there, right? Like he has always had, I don't want to say a run first, but he has always really liked having good running backs. Chip Kelly, his offense was frustratingly run first out in Ohio State, given the talent they had at wide receiver, and now they end up winning championship out of it. But still, he was a run first type of a guy. And so this team has no talent at running back. Like I don't think they are planning on going into this year with the running backs that they had last year, kind of carrying the, like, I don't think Alexander Madison is going to be the one who's, yeah, nope, that's our guy. And so I think they go out and get best available and load up with Aaron Jones, and then probably even draft another running back, either day 2 or day 3 in a pretty good running back class. Washington, talked about them with the Deebo Samuel trade earlier in the podcast. I have said before that I think that they need offensive line help, and they obviously need offensive line help, but I think that the offensive line free agency this year is lacking a little bit. And Washington still has a few holes on their team. And this is a very good year in the draft for offensive line depth. So I think they maybe take a shot with that and instead try to fill what also is a need, and that is on the defensive line. And so Milton Williams, defensive tackle who just won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles, I have him going to Washington. This offense obviously stepped up in a big time way, but the defense was a downside. And so adding a champion like this from the Eagles, some institutional knowledge of the NFC East, and give Dan Quinn some actual like talent to play around with, I think is a very good fit. And so you hope that the draft, you can kind of fill in some of the holes there and now use some of the salary cap space that you have to go out and solidify the defense and just kind of round out your team a little bit more. Chicago, they need offensive line help at all costs. Like that defense is actually good and they have a few weapons and they have a quarterback that you believe in. So they are going to be the ones who are really going to try to load up here in free agency on the offensive line. And so it's weird to say, well, they don't have as many holes as the team that went to the conference championship. But I think that was just a phenomenal coaching job that helped get them there. And Jaden Daniels was special. But for for Chicago, like, it was so obvious that the offensive line was a problem right away, and it was all season long. So I think they go out and add a big name and go get Cam Robinson on at the offensive tackle. And honestly, I could see them double or triple dipping in the draft as well. Moving to the Arizona Cardinals. I have them going with Josh Sweat. Offensively, I think they have enough pieces that they can kind of figure it out. The defense, they just need talent, and they just need players. And one thing that can kind of mask a few talent deficiencies is if you have a guy who can get after the quarterback. And we saw Sweat just bull rush a tackle into Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. This is a very good, aggressive pass rusher. And so if he stays out on the market, I think that this is a guy who would fit with Arizona very well. Moving on to the Los Angeles Chargers, I have them going with Amari Cooper. He struggled with the Buffalo Bills, but I do think that Amari with Ladd McConkey is a nice 1-2 punch. They are, I think, maybe a little bit more vulnerable on defense than I initially thought, but they coached up a heck of a defense last year. And so I think that they are going to maybe focus a little bit more on the offensive side of the football here this season. This one might get a few people riled up, but I have Sam Darnold going to Minnesota. I think Minnesota is close. And I think it would be a real gamble to roll with JJ McCarthy. And you know what? We're good. Given that he had a lot of question marks coming into last season and then gets banged up. I just think you saw that it works with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold finally was in a place that was maximizing him and getting the most out of him. And now it fell apart down the stretch. And so maybe that helps you get a bit of a value play on this one for Minnesota, and you can maybe shave a couple bucks off of that. But this team is right there. And so you could make the argument that, okay, they're right there. Let's really bolster some other spots, hope that the rookie kid works out, maybe get a Jacoby Brissett or someone behind him. No, don't do Jacoby Brissett, but you know what I mean? Like, get veteran quarterback X behind him and just hope that JJ has it figured out, but really load up the talent around him. I could see that. I just think you saw that this worked. It had no right working as well as it did. But now with another year in the system and a little bit less unpredictability maybe than a JJ McCarthy, I think it makes sense for Minnesota to make this move. So I have them sticking with Sam Darnold. Speaking of teams that are sticking with their guys, I actually have a couple now. As T. Higgins, I have him sticking around with the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati. Eye contact here. Just pay the man. You have an elite offense. You have people excited to come to your football games. You have your franchise quarterback saying, pay that man. So, pay the man. They have other needs, 100% they do. But you have such a high-level offense. Just pay the guy. Just pay the guy. And it's a good spot for him as well. Pittsburgh Steelers, I have them sticking with Justin Fields. I think they had a good start with him, but it was obvious that there was a little bit of room for growth. So let him keep growing and see if you can continue to maximize what you have in that guy. And so I think Justin Fields makes a whole lot of sense there. Moving on to the Tennessee Titans. They have the first overall pick in the draft. And so maybe there are a few things that they can add to, but I'm going on the defensive side. I'm going Asante Samuel Jr. He's only 25 years old, so it is adding some talent in free agency, but some youth as well on the defensive side. You're obviously tempted to go offensive line with the potential of bringing in a young quarterback, but they used their first round pick the last 2 years on offensive tackles. So I think you let those guys develop and try to really solidify things on the defensive side with Asante Samuel Jr. The Detroit Lions, I have them going with Khalil Mack, adding a little bit of pass rush depth that they needed after their depth was severely exposed with all the injuries that they had, but everything really fell off a cliff after Aiden Hutchinson's injury. And so Mack, he is not one that you build an entire defense around, but he is still someone that can get after the quarterback and put that pressure on while the other guy takes up like double teams and stuff like that. So I think he is a good complementary piece, but he is still good enough that if there is another injury, he can still go out and wreck a couple of games here and there. San Francisco, I have them going with DJ Reed. They need to get some help at defensive back, and he has some familiarity with the system there. So I think that one works for San Francisco. For the Giants, I have them going Chris Godwin. Again, they are desperate for basically talent, but I think they really showed how win now they are looking to be by being in the Matthew Stafford sweepstakes. And so I think you go out Godwin is probably going to be at a bit of a value because of the injury that he is coming off of. And you're not asking him to be your number one. Just be a number two along with Malik Neighbors, and whatever young quarterback you bring in, now you have a couple of weapons that he can go to. The obvious concern is the offensive line. I think they probably add a few pieces in free agency and then draft heavy at that position in the second round, depending on where they go with that first round pick, whether they do end up getting a quarterback there, or if both quarterbacks have come off the board, if you get a Travis Hunter or something along those lines to add to that offense, or I guess Hunter adds to both sides. But again, the free agency class for offensive tackles specifically is severely lacking. And so I do think that them just adding some weapons and then going out and addressing that in the draft, like the draft and the free agency really balance themselves out. It is just a bit of a gamble going with the rookie offensive lineman there when New York does feel quite a bit of pressure to win right now. The Green Bay Packers, I have them going with Carlton Davis in their secondary. They just need so much help on defense. He is a solid man-to-man corner, and Green Bay played the third most man in the NFL this season, so he fits the style very, very well there. The LA Rams, I have them going with Dre Greenlaw. I think you have a very exciting young defensive core out in Los Angeles. And I think Greenlaw, as someone who has been close to the top of the mountaintop before, coming in and being the adult in the room and being kind of the tone setter for that group and just giving you another very talented piece on the defensive side is an interesting call. And so I think that the Rams taking from the San Francisco 49ers would be very intriguing for them, as they are a little bit closer than maybe a lot of people thought they were going into last year. The Denver Broncos, I have them going with Byron Murphy. The defense played well this year, but they did get beat up in that playoff game. Murphy, a solid, versatile corner that can help this team out. Jacksonville, Javon Holland, the safety, formerly of Miami, I believe. They allowed a lot of explosive plays, Jacksonville did, a season ago, and he could help on the back end there. The Indianapolis Colts, we are now getting into a few of the teams that didn't have as much of the high-level salary cap space, and so this is where I think a few more of the offensive linemen now start to come back in, as their value kind of matches a little bit more with what the teams in the middle to back part of the cap space availability had. So I have Tevin Jenkins being the one going to the Indianapolis Colts. He is still a good young guard that can help out on the interior of this offensive line that just had some struggles. And when you have Anthony Richardson, who'll be looking to run, Jonathan Taylor, a very good running back, you need some help inside, and he provides that in, I think, a really strong way. Also, the ever-exciting guard pick. We do that with Carolina as well, as they go Kevin Zeitler in this. You have a smaller quarterback, so obviously, like the blindside thing, Sandra Bullock taught us how important that is, but you also, with a smaller quarterback, you need that help on the interior so that you don't have guys just pushing into his face and changing some of the throwing angles a little bit. Getting a solid guard like Kevin Zeitler, I think, helps them out in that way. Next, we get to the defending Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think they just stay with what works. It's not a position they spend a whole lot on, but I think them and Zach Bond is the perfect marriage. It's kind of like Sam Darnold with Minnesota before. I think Bond, this was obviously best case scenario season for him. It was a team that kind of maximized him and got the most out of him, and for them, like this was someone that you kind of plucked out of nowhere, and so if you have to pay him a little bit extra, he was such a valuable part of your defense. How can you let that go? So I think that it's a perfect marriage that those two have to come together on. For the New York Jets, I have DeMarcus Lawrence coming off of an injury, so it's a good addition to the Jets pass rush that needs some help, and they are limited in the cap space area, so I think that could be a move that maybe helps them out. Baltimore, I have them going Stephon Gilmore. Vet cornerback, can help out in a secondary that had some major struggles a season ago. Miami, I have them going Chase Young. Again, he is looking for a few more shorter-term contracts, and maybe because of that, the dollar figure might price him out of Miami's limited salary cap range. But I do wonder if he wants to go to a bit more of a competitive atmosphere. Miami, almost by default, is going to be the second best team in that division. They already have the offense set. If they can get that defense back to where they were at the first part of I guess now 2 seasons ago, before Bradley Chubb and all them got hurt, this could still be a good football team. And so Chase Young, I think, kind of helps them out there. Tampa Bay also going with an edge rusher in Dante Fowler. They need to be able to get some big stops that really did help them, or did hurt them, down the stretch. And in that playoff game against Daniels, who was just able to sit there and do anything that he wanted, they were never able to get pressure off the edge. And so Dante Fowler, he doesn't fix everything, but they don't really have the cap space to find that fix everything type of a guy. And I think Fowler can be a bit of a veteran coming in at a bit of a value that can help them out in free agency. Moving on to the Houston Texans. I have them going receiver here. And this isn't a great wide receiver class, but I have them going Keenan Allen. And now, a guy who has been banged up a lot, to fill in for a team that has receivers who've been banged up a lot feels like you are just asking for injury problems. But I think he is a solid vet, can be a reliable number 2, while Tank Dell is recovering from a horrific injury. And if Dell can come back this year, then he is a very, very good number 3 to go along with Nico Collins, who has really established himself as a legit true number 1 in the National Football League. And so, again, this is probably going to be a bit of a value play with Houston being pretty well tied up in salary cap space. For the Dallas Cowboys, I have them going with Jedrick Wills, the offensive tackle. Could be a good value for a team that needs help on the offensive line. Atlanta, I have them going with Mike Jackson. He held up with being kind of the main guy out in Carolina, but he was on a defense that struggled. And so maybe that brings his value down to a point where the Falcons can bring him in. They need so much help in that secondary. And so this can't be the only move that they make, but it can be a really, really solid move, I think, for them to kind of help out a little bit on in that secondary. Seattle. The obvious need is offensive line. But again, they are in negative salary cap space right now. And there's just, you're not, if you're bringing in an offensive lineman for basically a league min contract, then you're just adding to the problem anyway. So draft that position like 8 times in the draft and go out and address some of these needs. Now, maybe they free up a little bit of salary cap space by the time you're watching this or listening to this with a Tyler Lockett move or something along those lines. But for the time being, they don't really have a whole lot of cap space. And so I have them going on the defensive side with Sebastian Joseph Day. Again, they don't have the cap space to fill the needs they have on the offensive line. So you add a versatile player on the defensive line to help build out a little bit of that depth that you can you take care of some of the depth with one player at a couple of positions. I think that is probably the way to go for a team that is looking for value right now. The Buffalo Bills are all loaded up on salary cap right now. So again, not a ton of space to work with. I have them going out and getting Chauncey Golston. Had a strong year with the Cowboys, so there could be something there. A lot of the higher ticket defensive end options, I think, might take some of the obvious needs. And so I think Golston, it might have his value brought down a little bit, and that's where it could kind of pair up with what the Buffalo Bills are looking to do. 3 more here. We have Justin Reed, the safety, sticking around with the Kansas City Chiefs. He is such a huge part of what they do on that defense. I think they find a way to bring him back. The Cleveland Browns, I have them going with guard Aaron Banks, a potential value play to the interior of the offensive line, again, because of the Deshaun Watson situation. Maybe they get a ton of cap space, or maybe they get none. But right now they are sitting with exactly none. So there is... you have to look for values, and I think they do on the offensive line. And lastly, the New Orleans Saints. Marcus Davenport, defensive end. They have minus $47 million in salary cap space, which means you have to take a shot on a guy who has played like 3 games, or barely played at all in the last few years. So some risk built in, but maybe a bit of a reward for a team that is just looking for some talent right now. So all 32 teams with one fit for free agency. Going to continue to look at NFL free agency throughout the week as we head towards the big day next week.